So this happened. I'm actually in Tibet. But right now I am dressed as, let's see if I can do this, some sort of drunken Chewbacca or a bush that has seen better days. Really let itself go. So here I am in Tibet, aka Shizong, the Tibet Autonomous Region. There's a lot of tourism here, but very little of it from Americans. And so I thought I'd walk you through some of what I've seen. I've been here about 2 weeks. This is towards the end of my my time here. As you can see, the mountains are amazing. The slogan for Tibet is the rooftop of the world. The first thing you'll notice when you get here is that there's not tons of oxygen. Ranges in the capital city of Lhasa, it's a little over 13,000 feet, I think. Driving just a couple of hours, we got up to 15,000 feet above sea level. So the moment you get out of the plane, you will find yourself kind of gasping for air, and it takes a little while to get used to. Some people get blistering headaches and can't, think and can't do anything and basically just lay down, but they also can't sleep. So it sounds really miserable. Altitude sickness. I didn't have that. I'd like to thank Wim Hof's breathing techniques for helping me not have an issue with that. But even when you're doing pretty well, you still don't have tons of oxygen. You, like, the entire time I've been here, I've walked about this pace. You don't want to do any running. You have about 40% less oxygen, I think, in every breath. I played 15 minutes of 5-on-5 full court basketball with a bunch of Buddhist monks. It was me and 9 Buddhist monks. They were strikingly good. I scored a few buckets, okay? I'm not gonna deny it. But during that time, my lungs were on fire. And that was, 10 to 15 minutes. It was nothing. As you can tell, this area I'm in right now, massive infrastructure. This appears to be the rollerblading area, which I didn't realize. The infrastructure is truly incredible, and most of it has been built over the past, 20 years, maybe 30 at most. Hopefully some of you know that China has taken 850 million people out of extreme poverty over the past 30 years. Like 75% of all people that have gotten out of extreme poverty around the world, it's all been in China. But one of the things they do is they build up the infrastructure of the areas that were very poor, and one of those was a lot of the areas of Tibet, Shizong. The building up by the Chinese government has been immense. It's gone from 10,000 kilometers of paved highway 50 years ago to 100,000 kilometers of paved highway. I've been through, I can't even count how many massive tunnels built through mountains, and the bridges and the dams and whatever else. Huge infrastructure. And what strikes me as an American is I don't know that we build large infrastructure anymore, do we? I feel like we just patch up a collapsing system. Granted, I don't have my hand on the pulse of every city in America, but the last big infrastructure project I can remember in a city that spanned like 10 or more years was the Big Dig in Boston. But it doesn't happen often. It's pretty rare, because it seems to me that everything in the United States, all building that's done in construction, is to patch up what exists or to build something that will be profitable within, 3 years or 2 years or next quarter or something. It's always about, well, where's the profit? China doesn't really, as far as I can tell, operate in that way. It's more, what can we build that will facilitate the society, that will facilitate people's movement and people's lives. It's not saying it's all perfect, but I'm just saying, like, they're willing to put a lot of effort and a lot of time, although they do it a lot quicker than we do, and a lot of money into massive construction that will benefit people in the long term. It doesn't matter whether it's going to be profitable or not. You can hear me getting yelled at because I am quite the oddity. Hey, how you doing? What's up? Nice to meet you. People will just gawk at me, especially children, which I think goes for anything that's unusual. It's like adults are like, I'm not gonna stare, whereas children are like, I'm totally gonna stare. What the is that? Jesus Christ, who let him out? No, they're all incredibly friendly though. Of course, there are other areas that are more crowded. Here's a mall. A lot of people walking around getting food. And some of the other propaganda you'll hear about Tibet is that there's no religious freedom. Well, something we're told. However, there are tens of thousands of Buddhist monks. There's hundreds or maybe thousands of temples. There's over 1,000 or maybe it's a few thousand Buddhist nuns, one of which I got to be good friends with. There is pretty much Buddhism everywhere. Like, you see a lot of it. And the Buddhist monks I talked to and the nuns I talked to, they said that they have religious freedom. So it's just propaganda that's used to try and undermine China, try and undermine Xizang, and that seems to be the goal. And they know that because there aren't tons of American or Western tourists here, they can often get away with that propaganda without many people revealing the truth. And so they often do. I mean, the people here have just been, like, so lovely. They're just so nice. I mean, it's the same thing I encountered in Cuba. Just everyone seems very kind. And I also, like I said, I lived in New York for a long time, New York City. There's so many people there that no one gives a shit about anyone. Even at stores, like stores, you have that fake kind of friendliness where it's like, I want to sell you something. Hey, you're my best buddy because I want you to give me money. In New York, they don't even have that. No soup for you. Maybe I'm being overly judgmental of the United States, but God, look at that. Look at that view. This looks like one of these CGI things. This is like, you know, some Avatar. Just a second ago, it was 3 18 to 20-year-old guys. As I'm walking by, they go, hello, hello. And I immediately went into my carefully crafted fear of 18 or 20-year-old men. Not because they're going to hurt me, but because they're going to hurt my feelings, okay? Because in the United States, if 18 to 20-year-old men say, hey, 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 and they go like that, they either want to fight you, want to make fun of you. You know, I lived in New York City for 12 years. This is basically always the truth. Or maybe they want you to buy them beer. But generally, most of the time, it's not good. Hey, 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 hey. Not generally not good. So these guys go, hello, hello. And I go, hey. The guy goes, you are very handsome. And I was like, thanks. And that was all he wanted. This is not one of those things where they're like, now can I sell you something? No, literally, that was the only reason he wanted to stop me. Which, the United States, that's not the case. That's not a thing. Hey, you. I just wanted to tell you, you're very attractive. All right, see you later. But anyway, something I haven't talked about is the claims of cultural genocide, right? The crushing of a culture. The cultural ideas, there are definitely different levels of culture with Tibetans. Like, I think there are some that very much stick to the traditional culture and some that have very much modernized. But it's everything I've seen, that doesn't seem to be China's fault. It doesn't seem the government's fault. It seems to be that things are modernizing and some people are choosing to keep very traditional ways and some people are choosing to keep moderate ways. But it's up to them how much they want to remain in the old ways. And I see a lot of the Tibetan culture here, but things are modernizing, which I don't know that you can fault anyone for modernizing. The entire United States, which used to be very different, like you go state to state, it used to be very different. Now, it's the same 10 stores, let's be honest. Like, there's very few cities that have much, like, real individual life to them. I was kind of amazed when I went to New Orleans that it was one of the few cities that I had been to where it felt like it kept its own soul, like its own, it really has a different feel from the rest of the United States. Most of the United States have been quite homogenized. Now, is that due to an effort by the United States to homogenize all the culture? No, it's due to modernization. It's due to the fact we're becoming a global world. That sounds like a Yogi Bearism. We're becoming a global world, but that being said, I think there's a lot about Tibetan culture that is still very much thriving and is really cool. What else could I tell you? And there's plenty of complaints to be had about China, fine. I'm not here to go through all of them, but one of the bigger ones is government surveillance. Is there government surveillance in China? Absolutely. And guess what? There's government surveillance in the United States. We're just a lot better at making people think there's not. And making people think that it's okay and that You aren't being surveilled, you aren't being watched, you aren't being judged. In the United States, they have somehow convinced most of the population that we are free, which is laughable. Of course, there's also a racial aspect of this. Ask your average black person in America how they feel when they get stopped randomly by police. Many of them will say, well, you don't know whether you're going to be shot and killed. I mean, if you want to learn more about this, white folks, read a Ta-Nehisi Coates book. And it's not just racial, obviously. There's a big class dynamic as well. If you are poor, you are far more likely to encounter our police in the United States. But the other thing is, in China, I don't think the police, like, killing someone that they stop is a thing. I wouldn't be surprised if the number of people killed by Chinese police, like, on the street is, like, under 100 a year. Whereas in the US, we're obviously in the thousands, and we have 1/4 of the number of people that China does. It averages 1,200 a year, but that's actually half of it, because as the Lancet Medical Journal said, 55% of all police murders are not written down as police murders. They're written down as asphyxiation, or had a heart attack, or it turned out was allergic to tasers, or whatever. It's hi, how are you? I came to see Lhasa. Do you like Lhasa?
Yes.
Yes? Is it a beautiful place?
Yeah.
Your English is very good. Where'd you learn English to talk? School?
No.
Parents? Mom and pop?
Yes.
Mom and dad? Yeah. What's your name?
My name's Gama Tunju.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Look, and there's a bread smile. It pretty much sums it up, doesn't it? Bread and smile. So this is obviously the kind of one of the commerce areas. I do think that Shizong has a lot of nerve to have me fly like 24 hours on various planes, and then I get here and, you know, it's like modern. It's got like electric cars everywhere. I want to see feudal lords being driven around on the backs of their serfs. I feel like that's not too much to ask. If I'm gonna fly 24 hours, that's something else you gotta learn about being at this altitude, is when you walk into the sun, like out of the shade, it is 900 degrees. And the moment you step into the shade, it is 12 degrees. A lot of Tibetans will just leave their jackets on, even when it's like 90 degrees, even when they're walking to the sun, because I think it's impossible to keep putting on and taking off your jacket every 12 seconds. Like you walk behind the shade of a tree, take the jacket off, put the jacket on, walk out, put it back on, take it off. You just start losing your mind. So they seem to just leave heavy sweaters and coats on, even as they're sitting in the sun baking. That's a bull, I believe, even though yaks are the main thing here. Yaks are big here. They love a yak. These are all yak horns. That's amazing. The yak is a very important thing out here. It doesn't just give them meat, but it also gives them firewood, because they use the dung for firewood. And apparently it does not smell, because when they have been grazing on clean grasses rather than whatever we feed our cows, it doesn't stink. And as you can see, there's no trees out here, so free electricity. What would you do for firewood? Well, you do that. Making life work. Take a look at this. How close can one get to a yak before they get very unhappy with you? I'm not actually sure. They don't seem to want to hang out with me really, though. And they're a little more accustomed to the altitude, I think, than I am. So it's really not a fair race, I don't think. I just can't get enough of this landscape. It's just insane. The other thing that I've found with the people I've talked to is that they don't seem to hate Americans. They seem excited to see someone who speaks English or looks different. Which is funny, because in the United States we have so much xenophobia that there's a certain percentage of Americans that just hate Chinese people. They just think, oh, anyone in China, from China, must be, I don't know, a horrific human being, or out to get them, or spying on them, or what. But I don't get the same impression here about Americans. Now, I don't know what the hell is coming up here, but it is colorful. Do you think this is for adults? Could I get on this? Would I be looked at any funnier than I already am if I got on these rides? Because pretty tempted. Pretty tempted. Some of these are amazing. Everywhere you look, you get a shot, you get a view between the mountains, and it's just, sorry, a view between the buildings, and it's just epic mountains. And of course, everything is a parenthetical of mountains on each side. We're out here looking for animals for one of the episodes I'm filming. But right now I'm dressed as, let's see if I can do this, some sort of drunken Chewbacca, or I don't know, a bush that has seen better days, really let itself go, in order to hide and make sure the animals don't see us while we try and photograph them. If I were an animal, I think I would probably flee if I saw a troubled Chewbacca walking towards me, but you know, whatever. To each his own. It's pretty unbelievable, and it's sad that America wants everyone to hate all of these people. Now, with the building of this large infrastructure, you can have a lot of empty, seemingly empty places. You know, they're not packed. I mean, this gorgeous lake is amazing. Doesn't mean they're never packed. And I think people point to that and they go, oh, look, China made these empty cities and they're meaningless and they're useless. I think what the conclusion I've come to after being here for 2 weeks and other research is that China built these things because they were taking 850 million people out of extreme poverty, and those people are generally going to want to go to cities with more of the modern infrastructure that you and I probably are used to. I mean, I don't know where you're watching this, but many of them are not going to want to stay in extreme poverty when they have another option. And so you've got to have the cities, you've got to have the areas to let them move to. And huge YouTube show called, I think it's Yes Theory or something. And they went to that empty, you know, the propaganda around it was China built a city shaped like Paris with an Eiffel Tower, and it's empty and no one wants to be there, and they have this giant empty city. Yes Theory goes there and says, yeah, there are times it's empty, they go, but then the night comes and everybody comes out and they're playing in the streets and they're having a great time. And by the end of the video, they're like, I think I want to move here. This is amazing. So it is a lot of U.S. propaganda about like, oh, it's China's just building empty cities or whatever. I don't think that's it at all. I think they're building the infrastructure for having hundreds of millions of people no longer living in mud huts. And that can be an exaggeration sometimes, but some of the time it's literally mud huts. I did go see some of the extreme poverty because obviously some choose to stay in the area they're used to. I happen to be in Tibet. I know that it varies around China, but I happen to be in Shizong, and we went to see the old village where some Tibetan villagers lived, and some chose to stay there. And it's a level of poverty I had never witnessed before. This does not mean that the people who choose to stay there are necessarily miserable, but they live very different lives. The life expectancy before the modernization for your average Tibetan was 35 years old in 1951, 50s. And now it's up above 70, so it's doubled. The life expectancy has doubled. The infant mortality rate was 450 per thousand, which just sounds crazy. And now it's, I can't even remember, was it 5 per thousand? It's basically the same as many U.S. states. But anyway, we went to the old village where many people had chosen to move to the modern village that was created by China in order to allow people to advance and not be living in extreme poverty. And we also went to the old village where some chose to stay. You can see by the structures that there's probably very little heating. It just looks like a very difficult life. And you can see why the life expectancy was 35. I'm sure it's up a little from that now, but if you're living in those old towns with no medicine, very, very specific food items, not a very varied diet, Great use of words there, Lee. I've been around people speaking nothing but Chinese, and I don't speak Chinese, so I have not had a lot of time to use English recently. So maybe that's why I can't find my words. You can already hear me losing, just speaking, walking and speaking. I'm losing the oxygen to keep doing this. I mean, as you can, just look at that view. The view's insane. Just goddamn gorgeous here.